Hello everyone, good afternoon and welcome to today's home games. The months go by so quickly, but we are back with another one, and this time we're all kind of focused on platforms, and it's a subject that's obviously close to a lot of people's hearts because there's so many people on the live stream today, which is brilliant to see, and no doubt there'll be more kind of catching up as well. So I think that's probably because we've assembled such an illustrious panel plus Mark. I'll take you through the magic windows. Yeah, I'm not going to get fired after that. I'll take you through who everybody is just in case you don't know, but you're probably pretty familiar with everybody on this call. So we have Nathan Fryer from Planworks, we have Verona Kenny from 7IM, and we have Andy Bell from AJ Bell, and Mark Polson from my employer, the Landcat. So that's the panel that's going to take us through some of quite big topics. So while the kind of overarching topic is platforms, we're going to try and dive into some aspects within that. I think you all know how this works by now in terms of there's a chat down the side and a lot of you are already using it, which is great to see. So I'll kind of keep an eye on that and look for meaningful insights to contribute to the conversation. So please kind of put your questions and comments in the chat down the side. And then there's also an ask a question button down the bottom. And that just means that it's kind of away from the main chat and means that something will pop up for me and I'll kind of get to see it. So that's how it'll all work. The only other thing to flag is that obviously throughout this conversation, we're going to be talking about our State of the Platform Nation report, which I think is landing with people sort of nowish and sort of next week. And the way that advisors and advice professionals can kind of get a hold of that is through a platform analyzer subscription. So that's why you'll see a call to action down the bottom, which is sign up to platform analyzer. So if you want to kind of get into the numbers and the deeper insight into some of the stuff we're chatting about today, then that's where you go. So right, that's enough punting and preamble from me. I think we should probably hear from our panelists now. And I wanted to kind of talk about, I guess, the market and the sort of noisiness thereof and the level of kind of corporate activity and M&A that we've seen over the past couple of years, I guess, and kind of has that meant in practice in terms of due diligence and specifically people, whether they're looking to stay with their existing platform, move around, all of that kind of thing. And I think, Nathan, you're obviously doing due diligence exercises for firms all the time. So yeah. That's something that maybe you could kind of kick us off with, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I think there's some real new entrants coming into the market that are offering some really different and innovative things. You've got the likes of Fundment, P1, and obviously Seckle coming on board. Obviously, they're not going to have the legacy issues that some of the bigger platforms are going to have, but at the same time, they perhaps haven't got the experience that some of the more established platforms have got. But whether the advisors are doing platform due diligence on the back of these platforms coming to market, I don't think we're seeing that as much, but they are going on a consideration list because advisors typically like to see a platform have some history and some good strong ratings and the analysis as such as in the State of the Nation report.
Yeah, and Mark, what do you see in terms of, do you think it does have an impact, the noise and the headlines and all the rest of it, in terms of making people anxious and wanting to switch, or do you think it makes people go, oh, well, let me just stick with what I know?
But both. Somebody's reversing in somebody's office there. and he's having another truckload of gold delivered to his front garden. I don't think the sector thinks one way about anything. So it's always a bit of everything. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of advisors out there and they all think different stuff. However, whereas, I don't know, 5 to 8 years ago, if I was talking to firms about platform selection, AUA, that needs to have over 10 billion or needs to have over 5 billion or whatever, would have been a core demand. I think I've seen a shift from many firms, not all, to cultural fit and strategic fit and where that platform is going and what will it be like to work with them over the next X years. And I think it's, I don't know, it's a little bit like you maybe chopped and changed your vehicle or whatever quite regularly, and then you're like, right, I'm done with mucking about now. I'm just going to pick one and stick with it for a while. And I think a lot of firms, the next platform decision they make is going to be one that they will stick with for a very long time. And the idea that you defray risk in your business by being really clever and spreading your business over 4 or 5 platforms, I think that's kind of a way, right? Because to get the most out of any of them, whether it's one of the new guys or whether it's 7IM or whether it's AJ Bell or whoever it may be, there's a nice little phrase, adopt or adapt, right? And if you try to adapt to lots of them, you'll never fully manage, you'll never get the most out of them, and you'll probably trip over stuff all the time because they're all complex. If you can adopt them properly and fully get in with it, and that means making a big decision that you don't get out of easily, so you have to make the decision the right way, then you probably get a much better experience. And I suspect for Verona and Andy, that's kind of what they'll want firms to do as well.
Absolutely, I'd back that up completely. I think firms now are looking for a true partnership, not just the old, oh, you're the provider, we're this. It's how can we partner? How can we make the advisor deliver a good customer experience, make them more efficient, and then how can they get the best out of the platform? So I think those are the conversations that we're definitely seeing more and more of.
Okay, yeah. And Andy, what would you like to add to any of that?
I think the noise definitely drives conversations. We're probably at the sharper end of those conversations. Our BDMs are in the offices of advisors, and they're sharing the frustrations with them. Having said that, talking about moving, thinking about moving are very different and a long way away from actually moving. There is an inertia in our market that part of it is self-imposed, but it's a big job for advisors to move. And when I speak to advisors, I say, look, if you're actually looking at platforms, there's probably only 2 questions you need to ask. Is 1, are you going to change ownership over the foreseeable future? And 2, are you going to change tech over the foreseeable future? Because both of those things are what drive the noise, are what drive the conversation. Now, clearly then there's a hygiene factors around, service, functionality and price. It's interesting. We joined the market quite late, 2012 probably. And those early years, for the number of conversations I had where they said, yeah, we'd love to use you, but you've got a functionality gap here, a functionality gap there. It is quite difficult. There is that barrier to entry, and you're having that race about not doing special deals, which not something we subscribe to, and 2, bringing your functionality along at a pace, but actually getting your scale at the same time. So. But we all see it. It's with social media. The press will report it with examples very recently whereby it is news now. The platform's not actually not delivering on the service side, and it's a standard that we shouldn't be afraid of holding ourselves to. And often I always say, look, with advisors, it's when things go wrong. It's how you really test the relationship. You can always speak to me. Our senior team are available. Are we perfect? No. Do things sometimes go wrong? Well, I would hate to think that there's advice. We've all been brought up in that world where advisors shouting at providers is your default position. I think I do agree with Verona about it's a cultural fit. It's a relationship that you need to have that relationship at all levels in the business. And if you can't have that at senior level, then just by the makeup of some platforms, you just can't do that. We always think that for the size of advisor we're dealing with, we can, we don't tend to deal with the nationals, the big networks. We tend to deal with the larger provincial firms. We don't tend to deal with the smaller one-man bands, albeit there will be some who use us. We're sort of set up to have that relationship. So no, I think for us, when we see M&A as being an opportunity, it's an opportunity not to partake in the M&A. It's maybe this is a bit cynical. It's the opportunity that flows out of someone else's M&A that we start getting excited about.
Okay. And in terms of, so I think service is a really interesting point, and I can see that Andy and Kate have kind of picked that up as kind of one of their sort of priorities now, in terms of that will be the trigger to make them switch platforms. And I might come back to that a bit later, because I think, as you say, Andy, it's starting to come through quite a lot in terms of service being a kind of criteria. But I wondered about sort of whether platform development kind of on the whole has been impacted by all this noise and stuff. I was chatting to an advisor yesterday, and he said, what was it, platforms have stalled. They're useful, but there's not been any quantum change. And what he really wanted to see was platforms as an enabler of like financial planning models. So I kind of, what do you guys think about that sort of aspect of platforms are fine, but there hasn't really been any kind of anything to write home about, according to that advisor? Who should I pick on to come on that? Maybe Nathan first.
I think the financial planner model just wants a platform to, buy, sell, hold assets. There's nothing else they really want them to do, because, you had the whole situation where you saw some platforms offering TVASs for DB transfers and bits and pieces like that. It's not required. They just want the platforms to do the job and do it well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's interesting, because it really depends. Again, I think going back to that opening statement that Mark made, is that there's so many different advisors and they do want different things. So we work with some advisors and they're like, do your job, do it well, do buy your sells, safe custody, fantastic. But then we've got a lot of other firms that are looking more for evolution from the platform, but the evolution has to be to help them either deliver a more engaging client experience, so that's enabling data to move or a digital experience, or making them more efficient. And that's, again, a lot of it can be tech-led, so it's putting information into their back office system, or working more collaboratively with the wider ecosystem that they'll be using within the firm. Just going back in terms, I think it's really interesting that advisor said that platforms haven't been evolving. I think it really depends on the platform that you're looking at, obviously. But just to speak as a whole, I think in the last couple of years, pre-pandemic, there was probably a lot of change that was regulatory driven. So we all had to deal with MiFID II and all the fun and games there. And then there was a lot of things that happened in the last, say, 24 months that maybe should have happened before, moving to paperless applications and all of those elements. And I think looking to the future, there seems to be some key themes if we park all the noise about, all the corporate activity that platforms are focusing on. And a lot of them are looking at, that data, movement of data, to make the advisor's life easier. And then you've got kind of going into two elements. You've got platforms that are focusing on maybe a bit more of the D2C element, and then platforms that are really focusing on doing more for advisors and specifically clients in and at retirement. And I think that's where we're going to see a lot of changes in the next, say, 12 months.
Yeah. And I can see that the chat is kind of talking about, to use Kate's lovely terminology, were they a dick during COVID? That's her acid test for how you do due diligence on culture. But Andy and Mark,
so many of our recordings and things are basically peppered with Kate calling people dicks or telling them not to be dicks.
Yeah, that's generally kind of the barometer for most things.
It's the kind of gross national product of this.
But Andy and Mark, on that kind of point that I think was made just a bit further up in the chat, this whole, you talk about culture being important, but how do you kind of test that? How do you do due diligence on culture?
It's a tough one. I think, it's a good. We actually do monitor our culture quite a bit, in the sense that when you grow a business from 2 of us to probably 1,100 people now in the business, one of our biggest challenges is to maintain that culture. So I'd be foolish to think that me walking around and getting to know the name of everyone's partner and kids is the way forward. To develop different ways of doing it. But I think you culture those things. And it's one of those things that once you've lost it, it's gone. I don't think you can actually reclaim a culture. I think that I would pride ourselves on the fact that you speak to our staff and they understand what it means to work in our business. They live the values of that business. Now, it may not suit every advisor the way we operate, but there is a real culture there. Doing due diligence on it, it's not something that I've ever had to do on that side of the fence. It's one for Mark and Nathan really, but I think it is massively important, and I think that if you don't get to the heart of that, then if and when things do go wrong, or you're wanting them to come on a journey with you, because for most of us, we talk about a journey with the advisor. I don't think there's any platform will put the hand up and say, we're done, we're finished, this is it, buy it. You're saying to advisors, look, come with us, this is our direction of travel, and doesn't always go as quickly as people would like, but they understand what we're buying into and the way we're going to get there. So one definitely should be very high on the checklist. Fortunately not a job I have to do in carrying out due diligence on platforms.
No, that's fair enough. And Mark, do you want to maybe pick up on this point that Bruce is raising here about whether you do this whole thing of sticking to your knitting and sticking to your core service as a platform or expanding out? And he says that those that stretch themselves seems to be the ones that most moan about. What would you say about that?
I don't know, man. Guns and butter, right?
What does that mean?
Sure. It means that there's a perceived trade-off. It's an economics thing that if you produce more butter, you produce fewer guns, and it's two completely unrelated things and false equivalencies between them, basically. And my point, I think, with that is that the two aren't necessarily the same thing. There's correlation and causation, and they're different. I think in the main, and with respect to both Andy and V, because their businesses both have investment arms and do different things as well as core custody and admin. Many of the firms that offer lots and lots and lots of different services tend to be quite big, and big firms tend to get moaned about a lot, and smaller firms tend to get moaned about less, right? It's not completely universal, but that tends to happen. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily the problem here. I do think sometimes when people enter into relationships with firms that have a clear kind of desire to be completely vertically integrated firms, and we've no point in doing names or anything, but if you try to break their model and you don't want to work in the way they want you to work, then I think you've kind of failed that cultural fit kind of bilaterally, right? And I suspect the equivalent of Andy of Verona's BDMs out there, they probably shouldn't have encouraged that relationship because it was never going to work well. And this almost does link back into culture and due diligence and stuff. And there should be more probably of an element of providers. This isn't going to be popular, right? But providers doing due diligence on advisors and saying, are you a firm that really, really wants to work with us in a way that's going to work for both of us? And if the answer is no, then it doesn't matter that there's potential 50 million of asset or whatever you could move. It's going to be a pain in the ass for both of us, and it will probably not go well. So you'd be better off wherever it is. And there are definitely platforms out there that are great. They just throw open the doors to everybody, and it's fine, right? You don't need to partner with them in that way. They're almost transactional in the way that they work, and they're built for that, and that's great. Others need more of a commitment. And I think if you're worried either about the culture of an organization or about its kind of broader waterfront of services, you got to go and see them. And this is where the last 2 years have sucked so hard, right? Because when we take people through due diligence journeys, either on Analyze or if we're doing a bespoke thing, you can only get to the water's edge. Eventually, you've got to go and speak to the people. And where you can do it and when you could do it, you do need to, not every firm can do this, right? But site visits, as we all get back to work and all that kind of stuff. I used to love trying to get firms to go on a site visit, and you'd get the fresh paint thing. Everything would smell of fresh paint as you went around like you were the queen. And then say, and now we're going to go and sit with Nathan, and Nathan will tell us what he does all day. And I would say to the advisors, when they say go and sit with Nathan, just go, oh, what's that over there? And go and sit next to Natalie instead. I wasn't expecting it, and see what Natalie's up to. And you get a sense really fast. Advisors particularly are empaths, right? You work with people all the time. You can tell in 2 minutes if things are looking good or things don't feel right. and you need to listen to that. And the other thing I think that has to go with this is the community of planners and advisors and referrals and listening to each other. And we have service ratings that are done by advisors. Other people have the same stuff. Check all that out for sure, but a good old ring round is always worth its salt.
Okay, great. And just to pick up on a couple of audience comments. So Matthew, I think just generally for platforms on the call and platforms watching, I think as well, equally. But he just says it would be nice if platforms didn't try and paper over the cracks, because I think what he would appreciate is if something can't be done or can't be done well, advisors and paraplanners and professionals would rather just know and tell us the truth. And I think Kate kind of echoes that. So that's quite interesting. So I wanted just to move the conversation on slightly. So I think, Nathan, at the top of this chat, you talked about newer wave of platforms, and I think that's language that I've been using and that Andy and Verona have both picked me up on, so I managed to run both 2 out of 2 platform bosses on this call. But you were saying that is something that you're kind of starting to pay more attention to, and I think this is something we've kind of spoken about previously as well. But what is it about those newer platforms, newer to market platforms, that you say is kind of appealing? Is it because it's new and shiny? Your dog has an opinion. Is it because they're doing deals on price? Or is Andy's dog? Sorry to apportion blame to wrong people's dogs. But yeah, my question is, are you sort of seeing with those newer platforms, is it more about price? Is it because it's new and shiny? Or is it something else, the fact that they don't have the legacy kind of issues that some of the older guard platforms might be contending with?
I think part of it is the legacy. Obviously, they don't have those issues. A lot of it is price. There's some really good low-cost solutions coming to market. And the next bit is service. Because they're smaller, they get the level of service and get to feed back into how the platform should run, and what it should do, what it should look like. I mean, one of our advisors is working with one of the smaller platforms to beta test some functionality, which, if it goes live, is really going to change the market. So yeah, I think those 3 factors: the service, the non-legacy, and the price are the things that are making advisors stand up and have a look. And I think hopefully it will drive innovation across the market. Because they're smaller, they're able to implement it and move quicker.
And Verona, without getting kind of drawn into your rivals' business models too much, I mean, what would you say about that in terms of, I suppose there's younger platforms coming through, there's also kind of emerging models in terms of advisors' platform and things. So do you kind of pay much attention to that in terms of your own future development? How does that work within 7IM?
Yeah, so I suppose, competitions is good, and it is always good to see new players come into the market, because it's a great market to be in. And of course you do take a look and look at their offering and their full service offering. I think what's interesting with some of these newer players is that the focus is on the IT capability, which we know that platforms, are so reliant and, have to have the good IT. But then I think it goes back to that service and the culture. So they could have some really whiz-bang new IT, which is fantastic, we can all take a look at. But they've got to get the culture and the service element as well. And critically, the service element when you get to a certain level of scale. I always say that it is really hard to, of course, when you're at a lower scale, you say not a problem. Once we get to a bigger scale, it won't be a problem. But to being absolutely honest, we all know that scale has its challenges, and it's how you rise to the challenge of delivering on the scale and keeping the service as high as you want to, high as you need it to be.
Yeah. Okay. Andy, what would you say about that in terms of younger platforms? Choosing my wording quite
not
carefully.
Younger people, that you don't mean that, do you, Natalie?
Newer platforms and kind of more established platforms, and kind of where the I guess where the kind of best fits of each are.
Yeah, it's my birthday today, so we're a little bit sensitive about
Happy birthday.
Shall we sing to Andy?
Yeah.
I should be down here, anyway. I agree. I think competition, innovation, any industry that doesn't have it will itself die anyway. So I think I would definitely welcome that. It's easy to say things are great over here and things are terrible over here. Life is never that simple. I said before that advisors should ask 2 questions on due diligence. It's probably actually 3. The third one being is, are you making any money? Because if you're not making any money, then pound to a penny at some stage, they're going to be bought out. And then that new ownership will drive technology change, will drive cultural change. So, it's not to say, there's lots of really good startup businesses, but you've got to be convinced that these advisors are not joining a platform for a 12-month journey or 2-year journey. It's a 10, 15-year journey. And they've got to have some confidence that they are, they are going to be around for the full journey. Without giving clues as to my age, I set age of 27 years ago, and I've been at this meeting advisors, same advisors who were met 27 years ago, and even before that, are still doing business with us now. So I think that is important. But having said that, we've had a big internal debate about recognising the challenges, the competitive challenges that we inevitably face, both in the D2C and the advised market. And we concluded, because clearly you can go on a program of change, but we've still got a program of change we want to do on the main Invest Centre platform, things that advisors want and we've committed to, and we don't want to divert. So it'd be the easiest thing for us to say, guys, we're not going to do any of that now. We're going to go and turn our attention to doing the whizzy bang stuff that will look really exciting and sexy and persuade you to use us. We've taken a view, rightly or wrongly, we'll find out in time, that we're developing a new product. We've got to the point whereby we believe the advised platform market and the D2C platform market are both big enough now that it's not just a single type of proposition, and we already see that with the flavour of different platform propositions out there. So as Mark well knows, covered in his State of the Nation, we've got Touch will be launching at a date yet to be announced, but that is it's very much competing on that basis. But what you need to do is re-engineer the service process, and to a point whereby some of our existing customers just wouldn't tolerate that. They would say, "Look, we don't want to go down that road." And actually, so trying to change an established incumbent into something that really goes head to head against the startups, I think is quite a challenge. So both with Doddle on the D2C side, and there's all sorts of ways of actually leveraging off the main operating system, but giving you some tech advantages as well. That actually having a new product, it means we're not saying to people, look, there's going to be a big migration anywhere along the way or a big new tech change. It's something we're saying, look, we recognise the merits of what Nathan's saying. We see that, and we could ignore it and say, well, it's just taking the lower end of the market, or they'll never reach scale, they'll never be profitable. Actually, the good ones they will get there, and they will do well. I don't know which ones will fall into that bucket, but the ones that do, we'll be talking about as those established players in 5 years' time. I've got no doubt. So I think it's what makes the market interesting for me. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning, thinking, right, there's an interesting dynamic. I just think scale is still a big barrier in our industry, and rightly or wrongly, it's something that without scale, it is very, very difficult to create a profitable business model, and that will be the thing that will be challenging those guys. Not have we got a great product or great service proposition, it's how on earth do we make money, and just making sure, as you've seen in some of the D2C side, it's not just actually we're just pumping this to sell. We'll do a couple of fundraisers, then we'll sell on the third one and take our money, and then someone else owns it. So that would be the risk on that side that I'd be focusing on.
Okay, thank you. And Mark, I'll give you a chance to kind of respond to all of that, but also as the conversations are kind of emerging down the side there around why change actually if your platform is working, you've never had any issues, which I think some people think is a very outstandingly lucky position if that's ever happened.
It's a bit of niggle happening in the chat, don't you? I'm quite enjoying it. I think it's kicking off a bit.
Happy for you to kind of respond to any or all of that in terms of either the why change or kind of what's just gone before.
I've also got 2 questions for due diligence, which I think is part of this, right? And they're different questions to Andy's ones.
So the due diligence list is getting longer as the time ticks
but
on.
mine are better than Andy's. So I just like to make that clear. The two questions are these, and actually I didn't come up with them. These are courtesy of Mr. Mike Barrett, in one of his rare sallies of wisdom that we were treated to a while ago. And the questions are these: is this platform a safe home for my clients' assets? That's a good question to ask. And the second question is, does it help me deliver my client proposition to my clients, whatever that is, right? Now, those are both very, very, very vague questions, and they've got hundreds of sub-questions, right? But we're after safe home, right? Is it, so if you're a startup and you don't have scale yet, can you demonstrate to the advisor or to Nathan, if Nathan's doing the due diligence on behalf of the advisor or whoever, that doesn't matter because you've got access to funding, you've got safe custody arrangements, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And because of the nature of these businesses now, we also need to know things about how you build your technology and where is it housed, and is it in a shed out the back, or is it actually held on Azure and AWS and being done properly and all that. So it gets quite technical quite fast. The deliver my client proposition bit is the bit where the chat happens, right? Because if your proposition is I think you said it best, Nathan, buy stuff, hold it, sell it again, right? That's all I want out of you. Don't want to hear from you other than that. There's lots of platforms that can do that. But if the platform comes kind of downstream a little bit in your business and you want it to do more, you want to work with it in a different way, then that starts to be a much, much kind of more nuanced decision. It becomes a lot less about bare bones, a basis point here or a basis point there or any of that kind of stuff. And it starts to be about, for example, if you're going to work with a platform that's got an investment management capability and you want to co-create stuff with them because that's important to you, you can respect that, right? Some guys in the chat probably think, well, that's a bloody stupid thing to do, you shouldn't do that. Well, you don't want to do it, but other people do. And so they need to be really careful about their partner, and all sorts of other stuff has to come into play. So platforms have changed massively. One of the things in the guide will show you that of the kind of 22 big ones, and there's others dotting around, but 22 that supply data that we cover, 14 of them have got some kind of additional capability. And only 2 of the ones that don't are any size. The rest are much earlier in their evolution. And that's Transact and James Hay. And arguably now James Hay joining up with Nucleus, which has got other stuff going on, is a different game as well. So like VI is so kind of prevalent now that if you want any of those capabilities, if you want, even if you want like good integration, or you want a client portal because you don't like the one that's available somewhere, or whatever it is, right? Those decisions, I think, are not that kind of clear cut, and they do take a bit of thinking about. But, and again, I put words in the mouths of Andy and Verona here, but I think having sat in a platform years ago, but also worked with most of these guys over the last 10, 11 years that we've been around, you would much rather have a firm that comes to you and says, this is what I'm trying to do, right? This is the way I work. This is what I'm trying to do. Can you help me? And then you can say, yes, we can, or no, we can't. And whoever it was in the chat said, don't paper over the cracks. Don't pretend to be something you're not. That's important too. But at least if you can be honest and businesslike up at the front there. And if all you want is buy, sell, hold, great, say that. And everyone can do it. And that's sort of how it breaks down, I think.
Mark, I think there's some really good points there. And just going back to that whole, anytime, that due diligence. Normally as a platform, we get like these due diligence documents, which are like, 1,000 questions and all of this other things. But the best due diligence docs I've ever seen is an advisor actually, said, this is our client proposition. How can you fit around that? This is what we want to provide to our clients. And I think that is coming at it from the other way, rather than asking us what we can do, saying, this is what we want to do and can you help? And I think that's a really different way to actually ask the due diligence questions. Picking up your point about vertical integration and, reading your platform report, and it has a little bit about all the different platforms and the vertical integration, and I think there's lots of people that have views it's either good or it's not good. and I don't think that is actually one way or the other. Depending on how you want to use the platform, it might be a really good thing or it might be a terrible thing. So, us as a case in point, we started life as a fund manager, discretionary manager. We actually built the platform to support our own discretionary business. So we built it for ourselves and then expanded it out. So yes, discretionary was at the heart of it. So that's the little bit of the vertical integration that we've got. Now we think that has really helped us, and it helps us develop our platform. When MiFID 2 happened, because we're also a fund manager, discretionary manager platform, basically we got caught by all the rules and we had to develop around that and for that. So whether it's good or bad, I think it depends on where you're coming from.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm just going to turn to the chat now because, and I think I'll put this to Nathan. So there's some conversation around not looking at good platforms just in isolation. So obviously they're one part of a big advice process, and it all needs to kind of integrate, work with your CRM and your workflows and all of that kind of thing. And James sort of says for him it's an area that nobody seems to have really cracked. So is that something that you're kind of looking at in terms of how a platform fits within advisors' existing processes?
Yeah, so when we do platform due diligence for advisors, we ask them a set of questions about how they operate, which back office systems they use, which investments they use, whether they use ETFs, what products they typically use, what drawdown strategies, and so we'll go through all of that with the advisor form that they've sent us to make sure that the platform meets all of those different criteria. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I know that we're already at like 1:10, so I don't really know how that's happened, but I kind of wanted to talk about, I guess, one, kind of corporate activity, and two, private equity. So two massive subjects to get into about 6 minutes. But I'd be interested to hear what you guys think in terms of the role of private equity in platforms and whether you see it as moving the sector forward or not. Because I guess there is the argument that private equity is coming in because they see a business opportunity in terms of a sector that has a future and is sort of linked to sort of financial planning and clients' life goals and all of that kind of thing. Or there's a sense of they're coming in because they're there to make money and they don't actually understand the markets that they're about to enter, and therefore everything kind of regresses back a bit. So let's take private equity first, and then I might come to you all around my screen in terms of sort of outlook for the rest of the year type stuff. But maybe Andy, I'll pick on you for that, for your take on private equity in platforms.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, private equity goes where the sex and violence is, and I think that's what we're seeing. The platform market is where it's at. So I take that as a great. We're in the right spot. I don't have any particular views on private equity in the sense that are they a good owner or a bad owner. If you believe that the stability of ownership is important, then clearly it would be a negative. But having said that, again, you've got to look at the platform space in both sectors there. On D2C, I think JC Flowers has done a fantastic job through Interactive of consolidating that market, not being a murmur on admin. If you look into how to do migrations, then Richard and the team have done a fantastic job over there, and created real value, significant value. I look at the advice space, which is where the rest of private equity are focused, and I just find it, I've looked at lots of those deals, and I just find it very difficult to justify going down that route. Now, we're not thinking like private equity, so we see probably some of the challenges when you try and put these, you are saying to advisors, look, you've got these two platforms, these two IT systems, these two charging structures, these two cultures, we're just going to smash them together and then it's going to be fine. We all know that there's going to be challenges, not to say we've seen some start coming out the other side of it now, and therefore it can be done. So as long as private equity go in with stated intentions, and no one would dispute any private equity says they're going to be in longer than 5 years, you would be scratching your head. If people know that's the basis they're going in, and the good owners, they provide the capital and the support to management, then no reason why it can't be a success. But people have got to know what they're buying into when they're when they're on that journey. And I don't think too many people would be surprised at some of the challenges. But those guys are in there to make money. And if they do that job right, they will make money. There's no doubt about it. It's a market, albeit the margins aren't quite as high as often is perceived. There's a lot of grunt work goes on in platforms. The bigger you get, you start dealing with cash regulation, with cyber security, all of these things. These things don't just look after themselves. You got a regulator breathing down your neck, driving change in all different directions. It's a tough industry. It may look as though when you do it well, you make money and therefore it's easy, but look at the State of the Nation report, go down every platform, how many are making money? There's not many of them. And your private equity might bring some good disciplines into platforms where actually making money is not seen as a bad thing. It's seen as I'm a bit old fashioned in that front. Actually, it's sort of part of why we get out of bed in the morning.
Great, thank you. Kia says, might get that tattooed. I think that's in reference to your sex and violence line, Andy. Verona, is there anything you wanted to add to any of that?
No, I think I just agree with what Andy's just said. It is the exciting sector of the market, and that's where the private equity firms are looking, and there's so much activity going on. But going back to what we were saying earlier, it is still about the culture. It's about the strategic direction. It's about where the platform's going and the medium to long term plans, rather than all the noise that we're hearing in the market. So if you keep true to that, then that's the test, I think.
Okay, great. Various sentences for tattoos being discussed in the chat. I'll let that one carry on. Mark, as we kind of draw to a close then, so some of what we talk about in our report, which we may or may not have mentioned in the past 45 minutes, but it's down the bottom if you want to get it via Platform Analyzer, is around, so some of it is that we're kind of looking back at kind of the year or 18 months that we've had and who won and all of that kind of thing. But a couple of pages towards the end were around outlook and what we're expecting. And, given that we've kind of all been through so much kind of change and noise and market activity, are there still deals to be done, do you think? And do you have a kind of, I don't know, brief outlook for the platform market for the rest of the year, or is it all just kind of put your finger in the air, who knows?
Certainly deals left to be done. There are deals knocking around. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and I don't think that's going to stop. And we've seen as well that just because a deal has been done doesn't mean there's not another deal to do off the back of the deal that's just been done, right?
That's where we're at, isn't it? The kind of the second wave.
Yeah. And so whether it's Martin Gilbert buying into Parmenion again, for what I think must be about the 23rd time now, something like that, or whether it's the Epirus shifting a stake in the Nucleus group. There's plenty of room for all that stuff to happen, and it is really tough because so strategic stakes are changing hands in these exciting businesses, right? And that's a thing that happens with exciting businesses, and it happens if they're listed. I imagine on Andy's shareholder register are a bunch of really large shareholders as well as all the small shareholders as well, and from time to time they'll change out depending on what's going on. That can be true of any kind of business. The question, I guess, is back to the stuff that Rhoda was saying there is about the strategic intent. The owner is kind of there to provide capital and there to enable the management team to deliver the things that are set out in the strategy that business has. And in that strategy should be good service, to Nathan's point, should be competitive price, should be all that stuff that advisors need, and also whatever takes them on to the next thing. And if that's well laid out, which in many businesses I'm not so sure it is, to be very honest, I'll come back to something we said, and the management are strong, and you're happy with the thing, then great. I'm not sure that the fact of one kind of ownership or another, or that there are deals to be done, I'm not sure that matters that much. A couple of kind of tangential, very quick points. First is sometimes people try to judge this stuff, try to kind of judge the covenant of the owners. a bit like you might judge the covenant of a DB scheme sponsor or something like that. And it tends to get done in pretty clunky ways, like, are you fully committed to the UK advisor market? Right? And if you ask 25 platforms that, all 25 will say yes. And for at least 12 of them, it's the easiest lie they've ever told. Because the end of that sentence is yes, until we're not anymore. And so that's just nonsense, right? It doesn't mean anything. Second thing is this. One of the PE firms that we did some work with said that one of the reasons that this whole sector, not just platforms, but distribution as well, which is how they see advisors, by the way, in a very Mifid-y kind of way. One of the reasons it was attractive was there was loads and loads and loads of upside, because many of the businesses, not all, were really not run that well. And what they felt was that they could put in much, much more structure, much more discipline that you would have learned if you worked in retail or whatever else. And by putting in those lines of control, they could make these businesses much, much more profitable. Maybe a bit less fun, but much more profitable, and then they could realize value out of that. And that's it's not quite a challenging thing to hear, but it's kind of interesting to kind of game out in your head, like, is that true? Particularly when you get into some of the big firms, is it true? Is that actually, has it got a bit flabby? Is there space to do things better? And if so, somebody injecting that kind of energy into the space, that's kind of interesting. I think that's quite fun. I think that's quite a good thing. And that should go all the way through, except, of course, consultancies based in Leith, which are obviously fully optimized already.
Great, good, glad to hear. Right, I'll probably bring it to a close. I'm sorry if I didn't get to ask your question. I think Bruce's point is an interesting one to mull on around platforms don't always entertain collaboration to truly enable evolution. That sounds like some sort of platform market essay discussion question. So probably not one for
Bruce.
Now.
Right,
another one for the tattoo list. But thank you so much to our panelists. That was a really interesting conversation from my point of view, and could have gone in various different kind of ways and threads. So thank you for that. Thank you for sparing the time, because you're all very busy people. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us. Mark, maybe not so much, that's fine. Thank you to everyone who joined us again for these kind of monthly sessions. We'll be back again next month with another topic. But till then, stay safe and see you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.